So I would like to introduce our next session is about the interview of an author, Miss Megha Wadhwa, Dr. Megha Wadhwa, sorry. Dr. Megha Wadhwa is a migration researcher and Japanese South Asian studies scholar. She is a research associate at Free University of Berlin and visiting scholar at Sophia University, Tokyo, which is also her alma mater. Her research passion lies in understanding the similarities and differences in the migration trends of Indians in Japan, Germany, and other places around the globe. Her research focuses on identity, ethnicity, race, social class, women, and skills in migration. She is originally from New Delhi and was a resident of Tokyo for about more than 15 years before she moved to Berlin in 2021. She is the author of the book Indian Migrants in Tokyo, a socio-cultural, religious, and working voice. She is also trained in fieldwork filming, and her recent documentaries are Daughters from Afghanistan 2019 and 7-minute documentary Indian Cooks in Japan 2021. This interview will be taken by our fourth and current president of IJBC, Mr. Siddharth Deshmukh. So I would like to request Mr. Siddharth Deshmukh to come on the stage and start the interview.
Dr. Megha Wadhwa, welcome to Konnichiwa Pune to 2021. And at the outset, I would like to say thanks to you for taking out time and coming here for a very important and interesting conversation that we are going to have. So let's get started. And to get comfortable, I would like to ask, can I call you Megha or can I call you?
Yes, please call me Megha. No, please call me Megha.
Call me Siddharth. And I would like to listen to your story from India to Japan first, and then we will move on to your book.
Okay.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure. And also I had this talk with Shefali a few months back. It was wonderful talking to her as well. And I've been looking forward to meeting you. So thank you. Finally, we're here. So I moved to Japan in 2007, and why Japan came to my map was because my grandmother, she took a world tour, and when she came back from the world tour, I asked her, like, what all countries did you visit and what did you like the most? And she kept talking about Japan a lot. And the things that she told me in the time are still there. Like, she was talking about how people are very sweet and very clean and Fuji apples and things like that. So that's why I chose Japanese language after school, along with my, my bachelor's. So in the time I was being trained by Professor Ashok Chawla, who is also the advisor at the PMO office, at the PMO. And I was working for Marubeni in the time. And then I was looking for further education and I wanted to go to Australia. But Professor Chawla advised me that I should go to Japan because it was going to be my first trip alone and I was young in the time. And he suggested that Japan would be a safe country. And because I have been in this field, learning the language and working for the Japanese company, it would make more sense to study in Japan rather than studying in Australia. And that's how I landed in Japan in 2007. So thanks to Professor Ashok Chawla, that my journey to Japan became, because if he had not insisted on me going to Japan, I would have definitely Australia.
Okay, so that brought you to Japan and everything changed since then. But how was your first year? You really enjoyed, or it was still you're feeling like, okay, I'm being forced and maybe
No. I think I have a lot of gratitude for Professor Ashok Chawla that he insisted that I go to Japan, because it was a huge learning of 15 years. And as much as India has made me the person I am today, I think I spent my peak years in Japan. So that has made me, I have learned a lot from that country in that period of 15 years. And I have a lot of gratitude for Japan. And of course, most importantly for Professor Ashok Chawla, that he insisted that I go to Japan.
I'm sure. I wanted to say that first year, definitely you never thought you will be staying there for 15 years.
Oh no.
So what was
Even
you were planning to
even
return
Professor
after first
Chawla
year
did
or
not think. Yeah, even Professor Chawla did not think. He had sent me only for 2 years. And he wanted me to come back and actually get into the a different field, similar field as his, like do translation, interpretation, and stuff like that. But I have no idea, like things just moved on in a different direction. And yes, yeah, so I did not pursue only the language, and also probably I did not pursue the language to the extent probably he must have expected me to. And
Right.
I just went on to, but everybody has their own path, and I'm sure he's happy
Right. Right.
about it
Yeah.
too. Yes.
All right. So 2007,
Yes.
and then you left after that, almost after 15, 16 years after that, Japan. I understand it was you were in academic and the research goes on and the book shaped. So, but still, before I bring in book here, I wanted to ask you that you like 2007 Japan, 2015 Japan, which was like, where do you find yourself? Because when I was in Japan, it was 2000. I almost come back much more earlier than you, and then started traveling every year. And now also sometime I stay there for my business purpose and so on. But I think I'm stuck in that time. I still love that Japan.
Really? But do you think Japan has changed?
Yeah, I think things do change, but of course society
I,
doesn't
I
change
think
that
we changed. We are the ones who change. Japan does not change.
much.
It changes us. And then, but okay, so let me put it this way, I understand why do you think maybe now when I go to Japan, I probably will miss the Japan that I left, because I feel the similar way for India. So I think this is a very interesting human psychology, I believe, that when you leave a place, you leave behind the memories that you had built in the time that you lived there. And when you go back, you cannot recreate those memories with the same people, with the same atmosphere. So, and that is the reason we miss that aspect that we left behind. So like, if you ask me 5 years down the line, do you like the Japan now or do you like the Japan then probably I would say exactly what you said, because I still say that I miss the India that I left behind. And I keep looking for that India every time I go back to India. But there are few spots and places where I can find that India. But mostly India has changed so much. But I think for Japan, I wouldn't say I see a lot of difference what it was in 2007, 2015. The only difference I saw was that it was easy for me to find Indian food there. It was easy to, get used to the things. But that was also because I was changing in those 15 years. I was learning a lot. I was growing up. I was getting mature. I learned the language. I was able to understand the system. So definitely, I like the Japan later on more than I liked in my initial, 4 or 5 years, because especially after I joined Sophia University. And also I also hated Japan more in the time, because in the first 5 years you're actually either wearing pink glasses or you are absolutely in hatred with the country, or you are somewhere in the middle where you're just loving and hating, whatever. I think it depends on a personal perspective. But as you understand the country more, your love for the country grows stronger as much as your hatred, just for your own, like as it would for your own country. Like people in India, they love India, but they also hate India at times. So yeah, I think that is more to do. If you ask me 5 years later, if I end up staying in Berlin and I'm not going back to Japan and it's just a to and fro thing, then I would feel exactly how you said, that you miss the Japan that you left behind. So I would probably miss the Japan that I left behind, because I will not be able to recreate those 15 years of memories with the same sort of people or the same sort of workplace. So that change, yes.
Perfectly. So now let's get back to your book, Indian Migrant in Tokyo. I
Yeah.
read this book after reading the review in Japan Times, I think. Yeah, yeah. And fortunately, I had some good time because of this lockdown and all, and I was locked in Japan. And
So you were
so
locked in Japan. Wow.
yeah.
Lucky you.
I was in Japan. I just returned India 2 weeks back or 3 weeks. I think 2 weeks back. Uh, it was really really interesting book for me to read because uh, when you live in Japan, I was not a researcher, right? So you don't know all those things, and then
Yeah.
suddenly you feel, wow, I never knew or I never looked at that,
Yeah.
or maybe some of the problems which you mentioned, maybe I never faced, or some of the problem which you mentioned exactly face, but
Yeah.
you never look at it like wow, the way you were looking at it. So it was very interesting journey to go through your books. I think I read it, I will not say twice, 1.5 time, because once I read all and then I went back to all the chapters which I really want to pick
Like,
and underline, and I'm planning to visit some of the places which you mentioned, which I never know about, like Gurudwara and all. I never visited
oh
those
wow.
places. So
Yeah, you
I
should definitely go to the Gurudwara.
uh, of course I knew, because you mentioned that in a book, that so but our audience don't know, so I want you to tell us how do you plan this book, and do you call this book as the academic book, a book, or everybody can read? Is it for everyone?
Okay, very interesting question. Thank you for asking such a brilliant question.
Yeah.
First of all, how did I start this book? Again, I think I've been very blessed to have some wonderful professors or mentors in my life. And like my journey started with Professor Ashok Chawla. And then when I moved to Sophia University, when I started my research at Sophia University, I met Professor Cyril Villiers, who has himself been in Japan for 50 years. And I did my master's and I was reflecting on the life of Indian women in India after marriage. So I was in area studies and I was focusing on South Asia in the time, so my research was there. And in that time, I was attending seminars of a professor, Japanese professor, Professor Takefumi Derada, who became my mentor in my PhD. So his work was a big inspiration for me. He used to talk about his research focuses on Filipino community in Japan, and he used to do presentations in his seminar. And his work was very inspiring for me. And he used to reflect on the identity and other issues the Filipino community faces, like their how they maintain their. He was basically focusing on the Christianity aspect of the Filipinos. So that fascinated me. And then when I finished my master's, I wanted to do PhD as well. And because I was like, now I'm studying, and I always wanted to be, I enjoyed academia and I wanted to be in teaching line. And that was the reason why I went back to Sophia, because I had only done bachelor's in Japanese language, and I further wanted to educate myself. And so I decided that I will educate myself further. So I was like, might as well do PhD because I was a mixed scholar. And in that time, I was thinking that I want to do. So before that, I had been teaching English in Japan. And during that time, I could see that the knowledge of India amongst the Japanese people is very less. And it was just very limited to the cliches, like yoga or 3 times curry a day or things like these, which half of which were not even true. They were not even factual. So that used to make me feel a little I don't know what would be the right word, but it just used to create this kind of passion in me that I want people to know about India more. I want people to have more factual information about India, because there is more to India than just curry yoga. And yoga is of course beautiful. I'm glad people know about it. But yeah, there is just in brief, like there is a lot more about India people need to know. And that's the reason why I thought that I would like to go and study more so that I can teach something just more than English and not just stick to English. And then his research inspired me. And then I was like, okay, so I think maybe for my PhD, I'm going to change the topic and I will focus on Indian migrants in Japan. And both of them were very supportive of me to do that. And in the time when I was writing in the time when I was doing my research, I was obviously reading a lot of academic books, and I felt that sometimes the academia just limits itself to academia, you know. We are not able to reach ourselves to a bigger audience. And see, my purpose of writing the book was not just the people who know English can read it. I was also targeting that the Japanese should also be able to read it. And in my belief, there are a lot of people in the Japanese community who can actually understand this level of English. And so that is the reason why I am in academia, so I did want to write a well-researched academic book. And so I chose to write an academic book with a style that can be reached to a larger audience. So, and thankfully, with God's grace, I have succeeded to some extent. And also the book they have brought down the prices, and I'm further negotiating with them to bring it down for India. So I hope I succeed in that as well. Because as of now, for the international market, the price is good, but for the Indian market, it still needs to go down. So, but I'm very glad that they brought down the price earlier than the planned time.
Great. Do you think if this book is also in Japanese, will help more Japanese people to understand about
Yeah,
India?
that is going to happen.
That's
Too.
going to happen. I think that will be wonderful, because there are many insight and stats and many interviews which you took naturally, and a lot of research went into it. And I think Japanese love that, and that may help to further maybe bringing two communities
Together, yes. Yeah.
right, right. Okay. So that's about how you started the book. Now I want to ask you this one question, that migration definitely happened since ancient. Migration is happening, it will continue to happen in future also. And you pointed out how that migration is changing from India to Japan, and how previously who were the different migrants, and now who are the uh, um, uh, like more professionals are migrating. uh, but there are so many, government makes many policies, many things, but I'm really curious, why don't they pick up such books, or they bring such academician when they make some kind of a policy? Like for example, I'm recently hearing a lot about this technical training program, but I don't see anything there been considered which is mentioned in your book. Being an IT professional, being running this my company from 2005, and seeing how many IT people are there, and when suddenly, for stats we know you need 600,000 IT engineers. For stats we know you need to around 200,000 IT engineers right now. But how do you attract them? Which exactly many problem which you mentioned in your book? Would you like to throw some light? Which are those problems you think are a very serious and government should take a look? Because today at Konnichiwa Pune, I'm sure some of our Japanese officials are also listening to this interview, and it is purpose of this entire Konnichiwa Pune is that to bring academicians, government official, industrialists, everybody together and discuss about the real issues, and not only discuss about the newspaper headlines.
Yeah, so you're putting me on a spot.
That's why I ask you, should I call you Doctor or should I call you Megha? Because I want a real conversation today to happen, and I'm sure our friends in
Okay.
Japan and friends in India should listen to this.
Yeah, okay. So I should say a little prayer first. Okay, so now that you've put me on the spot, I would like to say it in the best possible way so that I don't offend anybody. So I think, see, when I hear the conversations or when I read about the policies, I see that at the top level, people are definitely making an effort politically, or in order to create a relationship with the other country. There have been, a lot of conversations happen. But what people don't look into is that what happens at the ground reality. Like something that I have tried to focus to my best capability in the book, in whatever best way I could, that we need to understand that, let me put it in another way, that for example, I am just giving, like an example. I hope it would make people understand what I'm trying to say. For example, when in my initial years of Japan, I used to get a very bad cough every year. And I would take medicines and it will get all right. And then it used to come back again. So it became a pattern every year at this particular seasonal change, that this will come, I will take the medicine and then it healed. And I got tired of it, that why do I always have to take the medicines for it? And why am I falling in this trap? And then I studied deeper, and I felt that I need to get into the deeper cause of what is causing this cough, what is the trouble in my body that is bringing out this weakness in me and creating trouble for me again and again. And then I changed my whole lifestyle. I changed my food habits. I changed what I was doing, my exercises and everything. And then since 2011 till date, touch wood, I have not had that trouble again. So what I am trying to say is that on the surface, we are trying to put a patch and healing the things or making them show that they are fine, but we are not looking into the problems that are deep down there. And that is something which both the countries need to look into, not just Japan, but also India. What India needs to do is that they need to create a lot of awareness that people need to know the reason why are they going to Japan and what is waiting for them there. The other day I was giving a lecture at university in Philippines, and we were discussing about the Filipinos moving to Japan. And the professor there told me that she has seen during her field work that people who move to Japan, they do their homework before they move to Japan. And that is something which people really need to do. And I don't see a lot of people, even that I have interviewed, did their homeworks before they were moving to Japan. And so that is most important. And one thing is that they don't need to sell themselves short. They need to know exactly what are they getting and what are they deserving of. In the initial years, if you want to compromise because you're going to a new country, it's fine. Yeah, we understand. And then maybe from there you will grow. So you need to do your homework before you move to Japan. You need to have a good level of knowledge of the Japanese culture, Japanese language, so that when you get there, you can also negotiate for yourself. What Japan needs to do, and now this is not the solution of the problem that India does and the problem is solved. Because I often see, like even in this conversations, probably many people have compared India with the population of Nepalese and the Chinese in Japan, which is way more. But that doesn't mean they don't have problems. They also have a lot of problems. And that is the reason there are so many scholars who are working on migration studies for different countries in Japan, and they are looking into what Japan can do to make things better. So like if Japan really wants foreigners to be a part of their country, they have to also put in an equal amount of effort in order to make them feel welcomed. I have come across cases where my respondents have told me that they move to the country, they leave behind, they also leave behind a lot in order to succeed in their careers. But their growth stops after a point, like some people have told me that as early as 1 year, their career becomes stagnant. There is no new learning involved. Because there are some teachers who work as ALT in Japan. They tell me that, they don't get the opportunity to actually they are assistant language teachers, but they know better English than the Japanese teachers, So the Japanese teachers should actually be more encouraging of them to take over the class, but they have a sense of insecurity, which lets them to, suppress them or keep them behind. But they don't need to have that insecurity because their jobs are secured. The assistant language teachers are not tenured position, or even if they are, both of them will have their job. So why not just, create an atmosphere that is a good learning for the students as well. And similarly at the workplace, see, if I think I have seen that the people who are good in Japanese probably do not come across this problem a lot. They are able to find their ways to climb up the ladder, and the Japanese work culture works in a certain way that, you know, you climb up the ladder as in a certain level at age, you know, so there is a way that people go about it. But then they have to create an atmosphere in their work atmosphere where people feel involved and where people feel that their skills are being enhanced at every level. Because what happens is when the people who are working in Japan compare themselves to their peers in India or in other countries, they feel that their progress is slight bit low, and that creates a lot of you know, thoughts in their mind too. So I think that aspect will be important to look into, that from the Indian side, the language perspective and to educate themselves, and from the Japanese perspective, it is important that the companies also learn English. Definitely, it's a global language and there is a requirement for them to learn English as well. And there is a sense of inclusion at the workplace where people feel that they are also the part of the company, because many of the meetings, they happen in Japanese. So again, you know, the point just keeps revolving around the language. People also have told me that when they work in the Japanese companies, they don't feel, the Japanese try to make them feel as a part of them, which is a good point. But the bad point is they also expect them to be like Japanese, but they can't be Japanese, you know. So the whole idea of diversity does not mean that you make a foreigner a Japanese. The idea of diversity is that you teach them what you have and you learn from them what they have. That is what the, you know, diversity is. But what happens in the actual place is that they hire them and they try to be inclusive, but in the process of being inclusive, they put a lot of pressure on them to be like them, you know, like they expect the foreigners to be like the Japanese, which is not possible because they have lived half of their life in a different culture and they can't be. So there has to be like a salad bowl, you know, where there is a mixture of everybody and people are happy with there is this word tabunka kyose, you know, which is being talked about a lot in Japan in the time. So people need to look into diversity from a right perspective, not from a perspective of making someone else, you know, from the perspective of let them be and learn from them and let them also learn from you, so that there is a peaceful environment created, which is also a part of, you know, if you look deeper, it is a part of any human relationship as well, right? When you are in a marriage, you don't, if you expect your wife to be like you, it is not possible, you know. Then what's the whole meaning of the relationship when you cannot accept the other person like they are? But then you adapt to their lifestyle and they adapt to your lifestyle, and that is how things get into function and the relationship is long sustaining. But that is if they want a long sustaining relationship. The question is, does Japan want a long sustaining relationship with foreigners? You know, does that
When
answer
you
your
mention
question?
foreigners, are you specifically talking about Asians, or are we including
No,
Westerners?
I'm largely talking about everybody.
Right. So
Asians more,
the
of course.
fundamental
Asians,
problem like
Asian,
diversity, inclusivity, growth, this is for all the foreigners, right?
of course, yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
So are there any specific issues with Asians or Indians that you want to say?
Okay,
What your findings say?
for particularly Indians, of course, like, you know, the issues with the Indians also overlap with issues with other Asians. But particularly for Indians, what I can say is that at the workplace, I think at the workplace, they're quite similar with other Asian people, but from the perspective of language, is something that the issues come up. And also because, for example, there are people from countries that are, for them, it's easier to learn the language because their original language has similarities with the Japanese language. So it is easy for them to adapt in many ways, in a quicker way. than it could be for an Indian. And from the other perspective, it is like the Indian culture, whether it is about food or whether it is about the attitude, the whole upbringing is a little different from the Japanese culture, you know. So that also creates a little bit of uh, adaptability issues. Like, for example, in Japan, we have the nomikai culture, and many Indians don't drink or they don't eat non-veg. And even though they say no to go to these places, or even if they go to these places, there is not like a full involvement. And that sometimes leads to a slight bit of exclusion, because they are not, because Nomikai is the place where all the connections or the conversations happen with your colleagues outside of work, you know. So that creates a connection with the people in your workplace. And if you are not able to go to that workplace because of your food or drinking limitations, then you probably are not able to enjoy. The Japanese people in that sense are very accommodative. They do try to create make you feel comfortable and create an atmosphere where you can have the vegetarian food, or you can have the non-alcoholic drinks. But I think that creates a little bit of a distance between the two people. But I think it also differs from person to person. Like, you know, some people don't mind it, but largely this is a culture in Japan. So I'm not sure what would be the right solution for this. I think it would just be an acceptance, like, you know, that you feel confident about where you're coming from, and then you just do what you feel right. And the Japanese people can also create some kind of other activities rather than just nomikai, to create that inclusion for people who are, you know, not into a nomikai culture.
Right. So I have completely understand. These are very tough questions, not only in Japan, but also in India, including diversity. And rest of the part, we know what's happening in other parts, like in Western countries, about the diversity and inclusion. So maybe these are little tough nuts to crack. But yes, if, as you mentioned, if Japanese need foreigners, they will have to think about it and take more opinions from people like you. What are the easy things that can be fixed or that are possible to fix, like schooling or some of the day-to-day life things that which you mentioned, like what the problems Indian international school face, or food problem, or some other day-to-day life which can be fixed very easily, and the life of foreigners, or in, to be specific, can be made easy. One of them, like for example, you mentioned that, like in Indian IT companies, people are used to see the 30 at minimum 30% growth every year in a salary. So that doesn't happen in Japan. So I don't say that that should happen in Japan, but they cannot just keep people 4 or 5 years on the same salary. So no IT engineer is going to work
Yeah,
in Japan
exactly.
for sure, 100% for sure. And you cannot say that our company policy is like that. You will have to change that policy for
Exactly.
Indians. So these are some of the maybe easy things to fix. What is
I
your
actually missed one very important point. I was also told in some of my interviews, like, for example, there were people who were not able to take time off from work. And so, like, if they did, for example, if they took a day off, the manager would be upset that, why did you take a day off? You shouldn't have taken day off. And they would be made to feel guilty about taking day off. So taking day off guilt has to be, you know, understood. Like, I mean, like, the foreigners, if they are in a Japanese setup, they have to go and meet their families, and they have a life of their own, which should be respected, which is very important, which is not a part of the Japanese culture. We understand. But then the foreigners have a family left behind, and they would want to go and see them. Or even if they don't want to go for the family, there is a holiday culture which needs to be respected. And also, it's good for the mental health of the Japanese people themselves. You know, they need to take regular breaks. So this taking off culture has to be given more importance. And secondly, I was also told, like, if they leave their workplace at 6:30, they would get, like, you know, judgmental eyes from their colleagues. which should not be there. If you are choosing to work longer at your workplace, it's your personal choice, but you shouldn't judge the other person if they are leaving, if they want to give their personal life or their family priority, provided they have finished their work, you know. So, and I think this is something I love about Germany. Initially, because I think I am a lot Japanized. I love working, but I will not judge anybody else who is not working as much as me. I want to stay at work as long as I can, and I don't care because I enjoy it. But that doesn't mean that I would expect the other person or I would judge the other person if they leave at 6:30, you know. So that is the thing. So which I really love. Like here, I get the freedom. If I want to work long, I am working long in my room. Nobody's going to say anything to me. But if somebody is leaving at 5 p.m., nobody's going to say anything to them as well, you know, because actually they are leaving at their actual time and they have all the rights to leave at their actual time. Something very interesting my respondents in Germany are telling me is that when they worked here, and so Indian people also have this tendency, you know, some, not just me, like some people, they just work when they move abroad, they just enjoy working and they work a lot. And especially if they are single, yeah, so they have like their investment goes a lot into work. So then a respondent of mine, she was like, she didn't take days off. And then she got a letter from the HR that you have to take day off. These are your pending days. You should be off. Please don't come to the office. So I think so this is interesting. And I love here that Sundays, everything is closed. Initially you feel like, oh, why is it closed? But then you understand in a deeper sense for the good of the society, people have a life, they are giving themselves a time off and they are refreshing themselves and they will be able to put in more work, more focused work when they actually do go back to work after break. So that is something very important. This is one change that should happen, not just for the foreigners, but also for the mental health of the Japanese people, you know. The karoshi culture is in Japan, which is a construction of Japan. It is not a something which needs to be looked into, and that is also something which people have been, the researchers have been talking about a lot. So that is something to be looked into. And then sorry, I think I diverted myself from the real question you asked. Okay, so you were asking about
Yeah,
the little problems.
that's fine. But point you mentioned are very important. Now I wanted to direct you that what are the other quick fixes so that Indian
Yes,
migrant
yeah. So
can.
you were talking about the education. Yeah, so
Yeah,
quick fix from the Indian side, I think there are many schools in India already that are introducing Japanese language as an extra language right now, right? Along with the other foreign languages like German, French, that were the popular languages. And now Japanese also has become, like, I have so many nieces and nephews who are learning Japanese and who have this, you know, desire to go and visit Japan now at such a young age. So, and then we have a lot of but still there is Japan beyond sushi and manga, which people need to know, both from the good and the bad side. And people need to know that perfection is a myth. No country is perfect. Every country has some kind of issues which they need to acknowledge or which they need to know so that they know what they are going for. And then from the Japanese side, I think the media needs to focus on the image of India, because the Japanese media is probably still stuck a little bit on the old Indian image of eating curry 3 times a day, or India, the, you know, like the, you know, like there are these cliche images about India that are there. And then suddenly people are talking about Indians, mathematics, intelligence, and IT, and economy and stuff like that. But they also need to look into the other good and bad sides of India, both in depth, not just on the surface, you know. So what both the education systems are doing are, they are not giving like a deep awareness about their cultures to each other. They are just stuck on the cliches on both the sides. So that is something which I do mention in my book. And I think my purpose of writing this book was that you need to think beyond the cliches. You need to know about each other's society in a way deeper sense than just on a superficial level, in order to be able to understand each other. And that's where the quick fix will happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I also felt that while working, it's not only that we will be demanding, we need to change and we need to understand we are going to Japan. And as you rightly mentioned, no country is perfect. But
Yeah,
when we are expecting lot many migrants, country don't need to be perfect, but country need to uh, facilitate some of the things. And one of the
exactly.
important thing I read on your book, and that's I feel very very interesting and important. And today on this forum, I want to bring that point and discuss with you. Spouses, when the spouses go to US or UK or Australia, usually they get job or usually they start business. And some of the time we saw the spouse, sometimes the spouses become more successful than the original person they follow,
Even in Germany, actually.
right? So but that is very hard to happen in Japan.
Definitely.
And what is that your research said, and what is the solution you can propose? I mean, of course not a uh, perfect solution, but what is your thoughts on that?
I think the Indian women are so smart, they find a solution for themselves. They are so powerful and they have found their niche despite of all the struggles. And I feel really proud of them. Their stories have fascinated me so much. They moved to Japan for their husbands, but they have created a life for themselves with their hard work, with so many things despite of all the challenges. So like you said, like in other countries, they probably do not have to go through as much of a challenge than they probably did in Japan, the Indian women who were the trailing spouse. One, because they moved to Japan with the sadly with the perspective that there will be many Indians. Now there are many, hopefully, if I can call 40,000 many, maybe not as many, but still. So so they move with the thing that okay, they are leaving India and moving to Japan. So imagine when you just are newlywed, you already have so many struggles you have to go through when you are in a new marriage, and you have to, even though there is a lot of excitement of getting married, but there are adjustments everybody has to make in a new relationship. Just like moving to a new country, first 6 months are difficult. So they are going through two things together: a relationship with a new country and a relationship with the partner or living with the partner. So in that time, many of them, of course, don't know the language. Some people, some women are able to learn it. Uh, some husbands are able to finance them and let them go to the schools, and whereas the others are not. And sometimes people say that you can learn the language on your own, but I don't think that is something possible for everybody. Some people do need a formal education to be able to learn the language, and Japanese is a difficult language. Not everybody can learn watching YouTube videos. Some people need guidance in order to understand the language. So many of them are not able to learn the language for whatever reasons, or they probably don't have the interest. And some of them were actually well settled when they were in India, and they were doing some brilliant jobs at a good position. But when they moved to Japan, there is just like nothing to do, absolutely lonely. They have no friends and nothing. Now we still have internet, and it's easier to connect with the family. So many of them, they just end up having kids. And sometimes the women also say it themselves that there was nothing to do, so I thought, okay, might as well just have a baby, because I eventually want to have a baby. And then they get busy in their
And what do
motherhood.
you think? Can the Japanese municipal parties or
I lost your voice, Siddharthji. Hello, can you hear
hello
me, Siddharthji?
streaming room? Yeah. I'm uh, not getting you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. So I was asking you question that do you think the local governments can create some kind of a community center where these women can actually learn some skills which are useful in Japan,
Absolutely, absolutely.
and
Actually,
actually officially give them some jobs or position and visas?
So my documentary on daughters from Afghanistan actually reflects that. There is a group of, this is a research of another professor at my university, and the documentary is based on her research. So they have started, like the volunteers in Yotsukaido, they are retired Japanese people. It's a, not because I have made the documentary, I'm saying this, but I think it's a beautiful story in the documentary. And it's just a 30 minutes documentary that gives a very deep message and a very beautiful relationship between the old Japanese people and the Afghani women. So these Japanese volunteers are actually supporting the Afghan community at a community center to learn the language, and they go step forward in helping these Afghani women to adjust and adapt in the new atmosphere. Like they help them go shopping, they go sometimes bowling with them. So it's a very beautiful relationship that shows. And I was actually telling my professor that we need to show this documentary to a lot of people so that Japan can create such community centers at various places. And I think it is also good for because these old volunteer people that are working in Yotsukaido enjoy what they're doing in their old age, and they feel a connect with these foreigners, and they treat them as their daughters. So if we have, and I'm sure the Japanese people would love to do it as well in the retired age, because they get some support from the government as well, and then they also go beyond that support and help them in so many things. So I definitely think that is something that can be done by creating more inclusion from the Japanese locals, like it is happening in Yotsukaido, and create an atmosphere for these women. And many women actually do go to community center to learn the Japanese language, but it does not stay for long, for several reasons. Like either they feel like there is not of a lot of learning happening, or they have children and then they get busy. So that is the reason why these particular volunteers in Yotsukaido, they extend their capacity by not just finishing their connection with this community in the class. They are taking this connection outside the class, and they create that connect, so that these people, because they develop a relationship with these foreign community outside the class, these members, they keep coming back to the class because now they feel that sense of attachment, so that not only helps them adapt in the Japanese culture, but also creates a language interest for them. So I think, yes, that is a very good point that you brought up, and it is something that can be done very easily.
Okay. So what else you found interesting about the Indian community during your research? Would you like to share that?
I think the most interesting thing that I found about the Indian community is that they are, what's the word? Like in all my interviews, I did not have any Indian victimizing themselves. I think they have a lot of love for Japan, regardless of whatever challenges they come through. They may be angry, this or that, but in the end, they love Japan a lot, and of course, they want to, they want the same response from on a larger scale from Japan as well. But I did not see them victimizing themselves at any stage. Whatever challenges, whether it was with men or with women, came their way, they have come out as winners. They have made something of themselves, and they have not given up. And so that was something very beautiful that I see in the Indian migrants in Japan, which is very fascinating and inspiring for me as well.
Right. Now, some of the not wrapping up question, but something I would like to ask, which will lead us to the closure, because we have a time constraint. Unfortunately, this topic is so interesting, and we can go on talking about it. But finally, I want to ask you this on the behalf of IJBC, Indo-Japan Business Council, because we have this mandate to bring this conversation to the surface and keep it moving forward. We don't want to just do it once and forget it. What message organizations like us can bring to both government, to Indian government also, to Japanese government also, I mean representatives, different agencies who are into it, that this is what academia is saying, this is what researchers are saying, this is what the people who are expert of the matters are saying, and this is a real voice of the people. What you want that message we should bring?
I think one of the important thing is that through your channel, a lot of awareness should be created. People should be told that, there are all types of people in the migration channels. There are people who genuinely want to help people to migrate. And there are also people who want people to migrate because they are benefiting majorly from it and they rip off the people. So that sort of awareness is required. It would be nice if you, create again, it just comes back to education again and again, that a lot of awareness on both the ends, not just for the Japanese, but also not just for the Indians, but also for the Japanese, like awareness of both the countries uh, in real sense, like not just about uh, their cultures, but about their everyday lives. People need to know the other side of Japan and the other side of India. So like, for example, it's like Japan has like this perfect image and India has this poor image, which now is like, oh, okay, economy is booming, but still it is poor. This is that, or what is this? So that the other side of India needs to come out. And also like people need to know about the things they need to know before going to Japan. So that is some sort of awareness. And also I think people need to look into the issues that the other migrants are facing and see like, how your situation differs from them, or how you can, like, maybe I was wondering, like, of course it is about India and Japan, but I did see like the conversation about Nepalese comes up. So you need to also look into like what kind of problems they come across and not just focus on numbers. We need to look into the real stories of people that can give us the lifelong learnings in order to make policies or to understand how things can get better in the future and help bridge the gap between the two countries. We are mostly lost in the things that have been happening for ages, but what again things go on to, like, are we listening to the stories, are we listening to the people who are actually going through this trouble? So these things are important, and through your channel I think you can bridge that gap.
Great. Thank you for that suggestion. I think that's what we at IGBC want to do, as you rightly mentioned, is awareness and lot of information that is completely lacking, which I over and over again and again feel the same thing. I have a couple of two more interesting questions for you, but before that, I want to just check if there is any other question from audience, because we are streaming this on another channels as well. So Dhanashri, do we have a question?
What about the education? And I want to study in Japan after 12th. There is one.
Okay, so it's about education. What about the education? And if I want to study after 12th, but okay, maybe you can answer this question. But to attach to that, maybe it is an individual question. How do I study after the 12th in Japan? But my question is attached to that. Really, is it a proper infrastructure right now available in Japan for the Indian children, or there should be something much more need to be done? And what are those critical points that we can do the quick fix? Maybe there are some very difficult point which may take some more time.
Yeah, you mean in terms of education in school, right?
Yeah,
I think it's a
education is
personal
good.
choice. Yeah, like many mothers, they come and discuss with me because they are distressed. They don't know if they want to send their kids to the Japanese school, or if they want to send their kids to the international school. Some people cannot genuinely afford international school, even Indian international school, and they either end up going back to India or they end up teaching their kids in Japan, in the Japanese schools. And then in the longer run, some of them are satisfied, but many of them feel worried. I also think like the Indian people also need to open up. It's okay if you are not able to teach your children, because the Japanese schools will take care of it, provided your kids are not being bullied. And if they are being bullied, then it is the Japanese side who needs to look into that issue to make sure that the foreign kids are not being bullied in their schools. So that is their job. But from the Indian side, what the parents need to do is like, it's fine if your kids are learning in Japanese schools, because, and even if you don't plan to stay longer, uh, your kid would acquire an extra language skill. So at least first 5 years, like Yochien, or the first five primary school, I don't think I would encourage parents to send their kids to Japanese school. And then if they want, and if their finances allow, they can send them to the international school, or somewhere. Even Japan has international private schools, which are cheaper than, again, like the international schools. But of course, there is a lot of fix we need to do, that again sums up to, again, the language issues, like, but in my personal opinion, I think it's a beautiful thing that your kid can learn Japanese language and can also learn English and can also learn their mother tongue. So the people also need to get out of that fear that they will not be able to talk to their grandparents because they will be speaking Japanese. When the kids grow up, they learn the languages, and it's a very right age for them to educate their children to go and learn the Japanese language, than just be very adamant about keeping them and protecting them, or protecting their Indian identity. You can always teach them Indian things while they are at home, but they need to open up a little bit to the other culture. But at the same time, like I said, if any bully, because many times many bullying issues happens, that scares the parents. So that is something that the Japanese side needs to address.
Right.
Even if I say and insist parents to send their kids to Japanese school, and if something wrong goes up, then things come back to, to being sad. So these are very difficult issues, which both side needs to work on. But more, if the Japanese schools are open to having the foreigners, they need to make sure that the kids are not bullied, and that is a diverse place in real sense. That is the most important thing. You can't expect a little kid to behave like a Japanese kid from day one, or even in 5 years, because they are juggling between the two cultures. So that is something they need to create an awareness in the Japanese school, so that it can create an atmosphere for the foreign kids as well. So that is one of the major fix they can do for the foreign students, not just for the Indian students.
Absolutely, absolutely. So everything comes down that acceptance of each other's cultures and accepting the
Exactly.
diversity. That's the key of a migration, I
Yes,
think.
and
Yeah.
that goes back to the point where we started: awareness and education.
Right, right, absolutely.
And
Uh,
willingness.
we have
Willingness
last
also should be
2 minutes.
there.
I want to hear you about your new project. What is next? What you're doing next?
So at the moment, I am in Germany, and I am focusing on my main project. Actually is still based in Japan, where I am exclusively focusing on highly skilled labor market, and how to define skills and qualifications in the process of migration. Because what happens is, for example, if you come from a certain country or a continent, and if you go to another country, your skills suddenly come down. In your country, like, I have respondents who were in computer science and teaching computers in their countries, but when they started to apply for teaching jobs in Japan, they were not given that job because their skills came down, and then they had to compromise. They worked in factories, or they educated themselves further to come to at
Right.
par with the qualifications that would accept them, that will be acceptable by the system. So my research basically focuses on, it's a smaller project of a bigger project. The other members in my group are working on Vietnam, China, and Europeans, and what are their problems in terms of skills and qualifications, and what happens in case of the Indians, that how are their skills and qualifications are defined, or are seen, or are perceived by the migrants themselves and the host in the process of migration. So that basically is the main focus. And along with that, I am also following the same pattern for the Indian highly skilled in Germany,
Okay. Okay.
in
That
order
would
to
be
enhance
interesting. Yeah.
my understanding of
Right.
Japan.
So, thank you very much for today. I would love to follow up with you on this, your new research, and would love to have the data from that and learn from you, and put it forward as a association towards all the stakeholders whichever we can. But I definitely recommend all the viewers here that please watch this video again, because it's going to be on our channel, but at the same time read the book Indian Migrants in Tokyo. It's amazing book. It's very much academic as well as non-academic book. You will feel interesting. It's written in such a fashion that you don't feel that you are not connected to it, even if you are not going to Japan, but still you will understand what are the things about Japan and the migration issues and the Indian peoples overseas. Thank you so much, Dr. Megha Wadhwa, for today taking out time and shedding light on different issues of migrations. And I would like to stay in touch with you in future also and
Thank you so much.
discuss many other issues. Thank you so much. Definitely.
Thank you so much, Siddharthji, for having me. It was lovely talking to you and finally meeting you. And I think it's a beautiful and a wonderful and a very useful event that you have organized. And congratulations to IJBC. And thank you so much. I hope this results in some support to both the sides.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.